Hey, this is Joe. In this video, I'm going to show you how to change the brake pads on a 2011 CBR600. What we have here is we're at the front brakes. We're going to need a metric Allen key set. We're going to need a 3/8" ratchet with a 14mm socket. And what we have is some new brake pads for front and rear. We're going to do the front first and then the rear. First thing you want to do is there's some pins here, retaining pins for the brake pads. What we want to do is we want to loosen these pins first off. Then we want to get our 14mm socket and we want to loosen the caliper bolts. And they're going to be pretty snug. Now, once the caliper bolts are loose, we can now remove the caliper bolts, and then we should be able to slide the caliper off the rotor. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, when you're loosening and removing the caliper, you do not want to apply the brakes at all. You'll push your pistons out and run the risk of sucking air into the brake lines. So do not apply your brakes. I'm going to go ahead and get a rubber mallet, and we're going to go ahead and tap that caliper to loosen it up. If we flip the caliper around, we can see the pads in there. What we want to do now is take the Allen key wrench, and we want to remove these pad pins, and these pad pins are what hold the pads in place. So let's go ahead and get the Allen wrench, and let's remove those pins. We want to remove the pins and set them off to the side. If you have a set of socket head Allen keys, that might be a better solution for you than using the Allen head wrenches. And when we pull the pins out, you notice the pads fell right out of the calipers. Now what we're going to do before we put new pads in, we're going to take some brake clean and we're going to clean up these calipers, get all the crud off of them. And here's the old pads, and notice the pads are pretty dirty. They also have a retaining clip on there. We'll see if the new pads have the retaining clip. If not, we're going to change those from the old pads to the new pads. Get yourself a drip pan, get yourself some brake clean, and clean the caliper pins, the bolts, and at this point, watch how you remove the little backing plate off. We're going to clean these as well. Pull these off. We can get rid of the old pads. Get yourself a paper towel. And clean these backing plates up really nice. Set them on a clean paper towel. Clean them as well. Make sure you get the threads cleaned as well. And when we first pulled the pins off, they were really crudted up with brake dust. So you want to really clean these really well. You don't want your brake pads binding, and the best way to do that is to make sure you clean the pins. I might even take a little bit of light sandpaper and or a brush and clean those up. Go over to Amazon or Harbor Freight, get yourself a stainless steel brush or a copper based brush or brass based brush. And what we're going to do now, we will clean up these pins. Looking at the new brake pads, there are no shims on the back. So what we want to do is insert the shims from the old pads, put them on the new pads. Notice the little clip on the bottom. That goes in the bottom of the pad. That clips on right here. And of course your pinholes go at the top. So make sure you put those on with the little tab at the bottom. And now we're ready to clean up the caliper and push the pistons back in, so we'll have room to put the thicker brake pads on, and then we can insert the caliper back on the rotor. Let's go ahead and clean up the caliper. When you're cleaning your calipers, make sure you just use brake clean. You don't want to use WD-40, anything else, because those will leave residue, and you don't want that residue on the calipers. Get yourself a paper towel. All the way at the bottom there's a spring. You want to make sure you get in there and clean the back of that spring. And if you can, get in there with a toothbrush. Don't clean the pistons with the wire brush. Use like an old toothbrush to clean the crud off of those. You don't want to scratch those pistons. So let me go ahead and get an old toothbrush, and we'll clean that up. Get in there with that toothbrush. And clean the crud off your pistons. Get the toothbrush all the way down inside and clean the spring in the bottom. Go ahead and let those calipers air dry for a minute or so. What we want to do now is take our fingers. They actually make a specialized tool to compress these pistons back in, or if you have strong fingers, you can push them in with your fingers. See, I was able to make a lot more room in there. Before you put your new pads and pins back in, get yourself a little bit of caliper grease and take that caliper grease and rub it on those brake pad pins. That way, as your brakes wear, the pads won't stick. Okay, when we get ready to mount the pads, take a look at your pads. One pad is supposed to be thicker than the other. On these pads, I cannot tell the difference. So what they say is the outer side of the caliper gets less air than the inner side. So what they want you to do is take and mount the thicker caliper pad to the outside of the caliper. Now, I can't tell the difference by looking at these. So we're going to go ahead and mount them. After you've let your caliper dry and you pushed your pistons back, now's the tricky part. Take your pad with the shims and put them facing, the shim facing the pistons. Take the other one, put that in. Now what you want to do is run your pin in. Okay, what you're going to have to do is, there is that spring down at the bottom. You're going to have to push that out of the way. Use your toothbrush, and then that way you can get that pin through. Then we can put the other pad in. And the same thing with the other pin. Now what you want to do at this point is take your caliper and gently put it back on the rotor, and you want to make sure that the caliper fits onto those stainless steel pins here. At that point, once the caliper is on, you can then take your Allen key and you can go in and you can run in, and make sure when you stick your pins in, they go through both sets of pads. And you'll be able to feel that when you push this pin in, it should go all the way in and seat up against the threads. That way you know you have the pins in all the way. At this point, once the caliper with the pads are on the rotor, you can now safely tighten up the pin pads. Once those pin pads are in, now you can take your caliper bolts, put them back in, and always finger start your bolts. That way you won't run the risk of stripping the bolts. So always start them by hand. Now we can go in and we can take the socket and the ratchet, and we can tighten those caliper bolts back up. Now, before you torque everything down, make sure you go back and tighten up. Then what you can do is you can then go through and torque in the caliper. Now, I've done this enough times that I don't need to use a torque wrench. I suggest if you haven't done this a lot, go ahead and look up the torque specs on the calipers. It's online, or if you have a Haynes manual, I like to use the online Haynes manual. We can now do the other side. On the other side of the front wheel, the procedure is exactly the same. And what we'll do, I'll do that off camera, and then we'll come back, and then I'll show you how to do the rear brake pads.